have studied classical singing, but I love to sing contemporary and experimental music. And if you would like to know more about me, please look at my website www.irenekurk.de. I will put this into my show notes. This is a German podcast, but once in a while, or maybe even sometimes more often, I do English episodes. In this podcast, I talk about topics all around new and contemporary music. I share with you behind the scenes insider knowledge, and I want to bring you the human beings out of the new music world closer. I'm cooperating with the NMZ, Neue Musik. This is a very important German newspaper. They have a print edition, but also an online edition, and I also will put this into the show notes. Well, I have started this British series because, I told you before, I really like Great Britain a lot. I like singing there a lot. And through the COVID-19, many of my engagements got cancelled within the last year. And so then I decided to have this little interview series with great artists and colleagues such as James Saunders, Tim Parkinson, and my wonderful soprano colleague Juliet Fraser. In this episode today, I talk with the composer and professor for composition, James Saunders. Hello, James. Hello, James Saunders. I cordially welcome you into my podcast, Neue Musik, leben.
Hello, lovely to see you.
It's really great to see you because we were supposed to meet last year in person in Oxford at a concert series, and we all know COVID-19 or Corona came, and well, now we're sitting at home, no concerts, but at least we can talk.
Yes.
At first, I would like to know, how did you find your way into new and experimental music?
Well, I started in my teens. I was learning guitar, having kind of private guitar lessons, and my guitar teacher, Graham Capel, was very unusual in that I think he had very wide-ranging tastes. So introduced me to a lot of music, which was very beneficial. But in particular, as well as kind of lending me records and things, he had loads of scores, which is perhaps the unusual thing. So I would go home every week with my Giuliani guitar studies and things like that, but also a stack of Xenakis orchestral pieces, which is quite a surprising sort of way into things, perhaps. So I was kind of fascinated by, I suppose, sort of minimalism to start with, but also anything that just sounded a bit strange, really. And he just lend me whatever he had every week, and I'd sort of become interested that way. But also from school, there was a few things in the library, sort of Messiaen, that sort of kind of stuff. Really, nothing more recent than that. So it was really just thinking there was all this music which I had no idea about. Obviously, this is sort of pre-internet, so it was harder to find things. So I would go to concerts as well, particularly at the South Bank in London. I remember seeing a really great concert of Boulet's pieces, Rituel in particular, is a sort of strong memory. But also going to the proms as well and hearing some of the orchestral commissions that came through there. So I was at the premiere of John Taverner's Protecting Veil, for example, which made a kind of deep impact on me at the time. Just sort of seeing what's out there, really. So it was a matter of being inquisitive, I think, but with very limited resources, although very, very fortunate ones as well, I suppose.
Yeah, very early, yeah. And did you also compose already at that age?
Yeah, I was. I probably started writing pieces. I mean, I suppose in terms of earliest memories, I remember when I was very little, I just started playing the guitar. It must have been about 7 or 8 or something, and I'd been given a book of how to play the guitar by Segovia, I think, from a family member, and it was at that point I was just looking at music notation. So I just remember kind of ruling out staves on bits of paper and just putting dots on it and then trying to play it to see what it sounded. Those sorts of things, sort of making those connections. But then really everything I wrote in my teens was for guitar, solo guitar, and it was very much modelled on kind of Leo Brouwer type pieces, sort of kind of slightly investigative, inquisitive guitar styles, rather than sort of mimicking the sort of core 19th century repertoire, and just seeing what I could do with that. But then probably towards my late teens, just before I went off to university, I was starting to sort of push beyond that and try to replicate some of the things I've been hearing in concerts, which I've just described. But essentially everything was written for the guitar at that point, because I could play it. It was there.
That's great. And what represents good, new and experimental music for you, or what music do you like to listen to?
At the moment, that's a very difficult question. I mean, obviously, I guess most people say the thing, it changes all the time. So perhaps one thing just to pick up in your question is something which I think represents good music and music I like to listen to may not always be the same thing. My listening habits are quite varied. I find it. I'm always fascinated when I discover something which I don't know much about or I've not heard before, and then I kind of obsessively investigate that. So I kind of sit downstairs and with my headphones on, scouring YouTube and iTunes and Spotify and things for everything I can find out about things, and then just immerse myself in whatever that genre or composer or artist might be, and then sort of listening to that completely till it's done, and then what's next? So I in a sense I sort of consume music in that way.
Yeah. I'm also very curious. I know that you're also teaching
yes,
composition. So how do you help your students there to find their style or write good pieces, whatever that is?
I think it's about creating a space around what they do for them to kind of investigate the things that are implicit in the work they're making. Obviously, to question that at times. I think it's, I'm not just hand-holding and saying this is all lovely. It's important to, I think, as I say, open up a space around their work so they can see the roots out of where they are at the moment. So the idea of perhaps, being in a room and making evident all of the different doors that lead out of that room at a particular point, and possibly seeing that they end up in another room which has got more doors and so on. So rather than just sort of saying you're standing, this is turning into a very tortured analogy now. So rather than saying you're standing in the middle of a kind of an enormous field and you can do whatever you like in that field, it's about kind of just increasing the space as much as possible. I mean that sounds perhaps a little bit of an arrogant way of talking about it, because most often the students know better than I do in many cases. I'm not saying I know more than them, but I think just kind of finding a perspective that is different from theirs, I think, is as much a useful thing.
But it's probably both. I mean, showing them new things, or also supporting them if you have the feeling they are on their right track. Then
definitely. I mean, I would say, and I would hope this is evidenced by the kind of range of students I work with, that I'm not looking to impose anything. I'm not. There's no. I don't see any hierarchy in that sense of style or genre. So I've got students who make kind of educational pieces, people who make kind of environments in Minecraft. There's all sorts of stuff that happens. Tech scores, normal kind of conventional score, everything really. And I think that for as a putting my sort of teaching and job hat on in that sense, I really love that variety. My interest obviously is in the kind of work that I suppose I make and the people whose music I like, but I always enjoy working with people who work in totally different areas. One of my PhD students is writing a kind of musical theatre piece at the moment, which I really enjoy working on with him, and it's so totally outside of what I do, but that's fun.
Great. And what are the qualities you most appreciate in the performers you work with?
I mean, an openness to trying things out, and not being scared that it could go wrong. So there's a trust there, I think, as well. And it's a difficult one because often I ask people to do things that, on the face of it, may undermine their identity as performers. You know, it might ask people to do things that are which they may fail at, and I'm very aware that that's a real issue for people who've spend their entire lives training very hard to do something in a very, very kind of virtuosic and proficient way, and then for me to come along and say, do this so that it sounds like you've just started learning, basically, or I know you're a fantastic clarinetist, but here's a kind of air horn. This is what you're playing. The players who are happy, I say happy, who are willing at least to put themselves in those situations, I think are the people I tend to enjoy working with. But often, when you find someone who really doesn't want to do that, as long as they, and if they don't want to, that's fine, it happens. People refuse to do things. I think it's also quite interesting when people really struggle with that, and I don't mean that in a, I'm not being confrontational in any way there, it's not really my approach, but it's about the way that people react to situations, I think, which I always find interesting. Mm-hmm. I try to do that in as supportive and safe way as possible, so any sense of possible sense of ridicule that they think they might experience is more aimed at the situation rather than them as people, I hope.
And how do your friends, family, colleagues, audiences react to the sort of music you make, and how do you deal with the reactions?
Different people react in different ways, obviously. I often have the conversation with other composers and my students of what their family makes of what they do, which is always there comes a point where I think there's a point where you can probably remember the last piece that your parents liked that you made. Mine was probably in about 1991, I think.
That's a long time ago.
Long time ago. But I think family members and friends are on one way just other audience members. And I don't think you can write things that are necessarily aiming to please people in that way. The way I see it is always I have to make something that I feel personally is something I'm happy with, whatever that means. Just simply on the basis that if I'm happy with it, I know at least one person is. If I'm not happy with it, then it's highly likely that nobody will be. But at least I know one person is. So that could come across as writing for yourself, which is I think probably what composers tend to mean when they say I'm writing for myself, because we have no way of knowing what other people will think. That's the sort of very kind of constrained position on that. But of course, I would say broadly, the things I'm writing at the moment are more approachable than the sorts of things I was writing 10, 15 years ago. I think that the surface of the music is perhaps superficially at least more entertaining, although that's not really my reason for doing it. I just think that what I'm exploring at the moment is just for what it is just a more kind of engaging thing. It's about watching people do things in a group, and that's always fascinating, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right, there's always a dynamic or an interaction.
Yeah, exactly. There's always, and I suppose that's what I mean by, when the question you had about performers, in a way it doesn't really matter who the performers are as long as they'll kind of engage with it, because it will always be, the piece always emerges from the particular people and the characteristics that they have and the attitudes. So it will always be interesting because groups of people are always interesting, I think, in some way.
In some way, yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is prejudice against new and experimental music? And if so, how do you want to see things change? And what are you doing to help to bring a change in these attitudes? I think prejudice is probably the wrong word. I suppose for me, it's more about a decrease in relevance, perhaps. I think that's the issue. I think
the kind of music we're talking about over the last 50 to 100 years has become less widely relevant for various reasons. Perhaps because of the surface of it and the kind of oral or conceptual complexity of it has perhaps made it a little bit more specialised. But I think also in the last 20 or 30 years, with the kind of plurality of music that's available online and our access to things, it's been swallowed up in the astonishing range of stuff that people make. And I think to try and hold on to it as some kind of privileged position is just not sustainable. I suppose in a way I'm suggesting that there's a kind of market force here, isn't there? And I don't mean to imply that at all. All I'm saying is I don't think we can assume any kind of privileged position for the kind of work we're talking about. It's just something else that people make, and there are factors that determine that, from popularity, from marketing, social media, all the kinds of things that draw people into work. But I suppose I go back to what I said about you said about audiences and reaction. I think it's about just making the work that you feel has something useful to contribute, and then making that available and hoping that other people will think the same thing. And it might be one other person, it might be 20 million other people, although that's unlikely. But I don't think the value necessarily is in the numbers in that way. But it does. But with that obviously comes kind of cultural capital, I suppose. It's not something I'm actively trying to change, other than making work which I hope is engaging in some way. Perhaps I would say that I think there has been a change in the last 10 years in particular. I think a lot of new music has found a kind of an interesting position between the sort of the rigour of the sort of disciplines we're involved with, and the surface kind of engaging the nature of the work and the way that it might appeal to people. Because clearly there are big audiences out there for the kind of things. There are general arts audiences who are looking for interesting things, and I think the awareness of the physical, of I suppose extra musical content and the way that can be framed within a work. I think all these things can help make some of the pieces possible to engage with, whereas perhaps they might have been a bit forbidding in the past. So, talking very generally, obviously here. But I think composers do seem to be addressing this. There's a drift, I think, in that direction, which I think is kind of evident. Mm-hmm. Particularly with pieces online, use of video in particular has really changed that. So.
Well, right now we are in. I mentioned it at the beginning of the interview, in this Corona pandemie. Mm-hmm. And so I'm also curious, how is your life right now, or what's happening over there in Great Britain?
We could spend the next 25 minutes talking about that if we're not careful.
But I'm so sad that I cannot travel there. I cannot sing there, and
it's very hard, isn't it?
I need to know how you are doing.
Definitely, I think the lack of being able to travel as freely as we could have done, placing Brexit to one side for the moment, because that's we really don't need to talk about that at the moment. No, because it's so horrendous. We're limited as what we can do. Lots of events have been cancelled. I think personally, we've found ways to do things online. Certainly in terms of teaching, that's worked in many ways really well, if not better. Particularly for our postgrads, where a lot of the students are not necessarily based in Bath. I think we can connect with people a lot more, in fact, this way. So I think when this finishes, we may well keep some of those aspects functioning. I think there's a lot of. I think that there's been a real change in certainly higher education, university conservatoires in the UK and everywhere else, where we're sort of realising, a lot of this isn't ideal, but there's so much here that is better about the kind of delivery and interaction we have. So I think when this all hopefully finishes soon, it's what's kept what good things we can keep from this, I think will be fascinating. And it takes sadly something like this for us to kind of rethink so many of the aspects of our lives. I very rarely fill our car up with petrol at the moment because we're not using it very much. We might go to the supermarket to buy some food, but that's about it. So there's those sorts of things as well. In terms of making things, I started off really kind of excitedly in sort of about a year ago, so April, May last year. Tim and I, when we were originally going to meet, we were doing quite a lot of online stuff.
I know, it's Parkinson, yes.
Yeah, we made a whole load of videos. We must have made about kind of 15 or so short videos between us, of work by him, work by me, work by other people, and it was great. And I spent most of last year writing a piece for Camera Ensemble Neue Musik Berlin, which was going to be last November, but will now be November 2021. So that sort of kind of took most of my time. But I think I'm finding I'm not making very much at the moment, which is, I was just thinking about that this morning actually, because I thought you might ask me, what are you working on at the moment? And I was trying to think, well, actually I'm not sure. I think I'm doing lots of what you might call personal projects, which is messing around with pieces probably I wouldn't normally have written. I'm working on these little guitar pieces probably, which are just like simple loops of material with a sort of what looks like a tube map, coloured lines that direct people around the kind of network of pictures. And those sorts of things are just fun, I think. I'm enjoying doing.
So you are creative in a different way.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've not really been making things. I've just started to. This could be a very, very bad kind of life choice, but I've just started to get into modular synthesizers, which, as everyone tells me, is basically the end of your financial security as soon as you go down that route. So I've taken one very small step in that direction, but it's just so much fun because it's immediate and you hear sound, you kind of can sculpt it in that way. So these are side projects. I'm playing the guitar a lot.
That's
kind of
great.
Revisiting things and doing all those sorts of things, which is lovely actually. I'm really enjoying that. But not making so much at the moment. I've just come out of writing this piece for Camera Ensemble, so that was most of last year, and we'll develop it over this year, ready for performing hopefully in November. So that actually did take up most of last year. So I'm probably not being entirely truthful about saying I'm not making much.
No, it sounds like you still do a lot, but obviously it feels different. I would like to know, do you have any kind of, maybe it's now different than before Corona. What is your approach to, I call it time management, and is there anything you would like to suggest to us that would help us? Do you have a structure or daily routines, or how do you work?
So apart from music, I think probably time management and methods of organising yourself is the thing that I'm most nerdy about. I am totally obsessed with time management. I find it absolutely fascinating.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always kind of exploring new ways of organising my time. I hope I'm relatively organised. Depends who you ask. And sometimes I don't feel organised. I feel organised today because I did a load of stuff yesterday. But I've got a stack of things on the corner of my desk, which are sort of notebooks and bits of paper I've printed out. And probably about every 2 to 3 months, I change how I organise my time. And it's a reason to buy exciting stationery, which is really bad thing to do. Partly because I think just changing the way you organise your time, or at least how you visualise how you organise your time, can just change how you think and change your kind of behaviours and work patterns, which I think is a good thing. At the moment, I've tried every diary journaling system known, and keep finding that they're quite good, but there's always something that's a little bit disappointing or doesn't quite work for me.
I find that too. I only know the German ones. I also do that, and there's always something I'm like, oh, this is so great, and then there's like,
yes,
I'm missing that one, and sometimes I really think I will make my own one at one day.
That's what I tend to do. I tend to kind of do all of this and then decide actually no, none of these do what I want, so I just make my own. So at the moment I've got this is just like a sheet of paper which has got which I print off every week, and I've got days across the top, and I've got it's just a to-do list essentially, but I had to make my own one, which feels nice. So I've got that one, which is a week at a time, and I just mark off kind of things there. And then I have that, which is the monthly one. So that's
wow.
for bigger planning. So I can see sort of 3 months or a term essentially in
super
university stuff. So I can see what my deadlines are. Because often I think, we're so kind of focused on what's immediately in front of us that having that sense of, that deadline is 2 months away, that one's 6 months away, this one is like 3 weeks away. Just getting a sense of where you are in that sort of longer planning, I think, is the thing that I always struggle with. So most of my efforts are involved in clarifying that. So I have all of those sorts of things. And then because I have a university job, we have a shared calendar, which is just Google Calendar, which is brilliant, really helpful. So all my sort of detailed time planning of what we're doing when is put into there, and I can use that to book tutorials with students. They can sign up for things. So all of that side, I've always wanted to try get away from the digital in that sense, but actually I think every time I try that, it does that so well because of the shared aspect. It's important. It's important for us to see what other colleagues, our students, their availability is, because we couldn't do anything if we didn't have that. But
it's very practical.
Yeah, I think so. And I try really hard to do that. I don't always succeed. I think at the moment, because we're in lockdown, I think the sort of work-life balance is generally better. I'm not spending 2.5 hours a day in a car driving to Bath and back, because I live a bit away from where I work, and that's been great. I mean, from early lockdown, it was perhaps getting up and doing a run and doing some composing and stuff like that. Now I just get up later, which is terrible. So I've become a bit lazier recently, which is perhaps inevitable. But yeah, I tend to, in terms of composing, I tend to work late in the day. I tend to work kind of sort of late evening from 10 o'clock onwards, because that's when the house is quieter and I can just kind of stop a little bit. Sometimes in the morning I tend to write. If I'm writing a book chapter at the moment, and that's I do that in the morning. I've just finished doing that for today before we spoke.
So you're flexible, that you can be creative at night and at morning. Wow.
Yeah, that's it. But then we have obviously family things, we have work commitments as well. So it's always just fitting things around that.
What are you thankful for today?
At the moment, health and our family's health. I think that's really the most significant thing at the moment. Most of the decisions we make are contingent on that. It's really important that we are kind of aware of the environment we're in at the moment and what we can do to obviously protect ourselves and our family and other people locally, which is a constant battle. But yeah, I think health is the most important thing. Health and the people around us, I think, even more so at the moment.
Certainly. Who or what has played the greatest role in shaping you, and what inspires you?
People around me again, I think. I think initially, your immediate family and friends and colleagues, people who you interact with on a daily or kind of longer term basis, I think are the immediate people who shape how you think and tell you when you're doing things wrong or could be doing them better. I think those are the most important things, really. And then beyond that, obviously, the kind of the world of ideas and art that we live in, the way that provides constant sort of inspiration and challenge. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm just pleased people make amazing things because partly means I don't have to, but partly not that I would be able to do all those things. But I think it's always inspiring. Mm-hmm. Just seeing what people do, even if it's some crazy stunt on YouTube to a new piece that someone's written. It doesn't matter. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what does it mean for you to be true to yourself or authentic in this music business? And how do you keep true to yourself?
That's a very good question. I think I'd probably respond by echoing what I said a moment ago about recently making pieces that perhaps I wouldn't normally make, which I think has been revealing for me, because I think there's a sense that the further you get into a way of making something, the more pieces you've written, I suppose, the more that establishes an identity around your work, and the more you're faced with that situation of continuing to exist with that identity, or to find other things. So you could look at that and think, well, actually, that's not the sort of piece I would write. Those sorts of conversations. I suspect we all have those sorts of thoughts occasionally. You might find yourself going in a direction which is probably a little bit outside of where you would normally be. And at those times, I think increasingly now I'm kind of making myself aware of that, so that I'm perhaps say, okay, well, why not do that? So all these sort of pieces I'm doing at the moment just for fun, you see, I've just said it, are, those are pieces that perhaps are more kind of authentic, to use the word you just said. But whether I would make them available is another matter. Mm-hmm. So that sort of self-curation is I think, fascinating. Because, we rightly say we do edit what we present. We don't necessarily make everything available, although I think that's an interesting artistic strategy, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Making everything public. But I think I'm always reassessing that as a result. We do a really interesting task with our MA students in Bath. I teach a course with Matt Sargent, who's great, and we have this really interesting group of postgrads. And for the talk masters, we have a sort of a 3-week rolling seminar program where we introduce a topic. What have we just done? Objects, actually. Matt did objects. So we kind of introduce that as a topic. We talk about work which might deal with these sorts of things. We then do a second week where we're kind of doing a little bit more analytical work, and then the third week is a creative task. So we introduce that at the beginning, so everybody makes a piece based on this particular task. So the one Matt set us was, I think, present a single object was the task, and we all do that. Matt and I do it as well as students, and it's always fascinating because sometimes I might make a piece that is a sort of a me sort of piece. Other times I might make something which is really not a me piece. But it's those sorts of things that are pushing you to do something that you wouldn't normally do, with no consequence really, I suppose. That always make me think, well, actually, what I could be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I doing this and not that? So I suppose that's a very useful question for me, because at the moment I'm always thinking a lot more about that, whereas I might have taken it for granted perhaps 10-15 years ago. That assuredness of what your identity is as a composer is something that I think we should all reflect on.
Maybe it's the time right now.
Well, yes, it could be that as well. It could be that.
Yeah. And what does success mean for you?
These are tough questions. Being able to do what I want, perhaps. I don't see that in any. I'm sort of equating success and happiness there, so that's interesting. I honestly don't know.
That's okay. You already answered it. I mean, you do what you're happy. that's a success, I think.
Yeah, no, but I'm just I'm now thinking. It's making me think what success means to me. I think being able to do what I want to do. Certainly not having to do things because I feel I need to. So I think it's a kind of a bit being relaxed about what I do. I think not being too precious about it, knowing that it could go horribly wrong. That's fine. It's more interesting, I think.
And is there anything that drives you forward, or do you have a vision?
In kind of if we shift the frame back to kind of compositional things, I guess it's just solving whatever I didn't do very well in the previous piece in the next piece. I think it's the sort of drive I have to make something new is often directly related to how well I think the last piece went, perhaps. If I've made something which I'm really, really pleased with, it's much harder to do the next piece. If the last piece has been in whatever way not so good, or something I feel, okay, that sort of worked, but then the next piece will probably try and address some of those things. That tends to drive me forward. But also just, being curious about things is so important, just from things that come up in conversations with friends and colleagues and students, family, to things you see online, bits you read in books, whatever, things spark ideas and those sort of connections, I think I'm always looking for.
We're ready at the last question.
Oh, right, okay.
And the last question I have for you is, which tip, advice would you like to give young artists?
I think just it's something I've said a few times, be curious about things, follow an idea through, see where it leads you. That's kind of saying use Google, isn't it? But just often you have an idea and you follow it through and you investigate it, and it leads to places that it might not normally. If you don't follow those through, you'll end up doing the kind of things you would normally do. So sometimes that sort of pattern, that curiosity to explore something, can change what you do. And there's a sort of I guess it's a kind of mantra that I often find myself saying to performers in rehearsals, and I think increasingly, actually it appeared in my last score, and I think it was going to be something that I probably end up putting in a lot of scores now, and that's just to say, do the best you can. I think with all the pieces I'm making, if people are doing that, that's all I can ask. With an understanding that's implicit there that you might fail, it might go wrong, it might go really well. You might enjoy it, you might hate it, but as long as you're trying to do the best you can in a particular situation, I think that's all you can do. Yeah.
That's very wise.
Oh, is it good? That's good. That's the first time that's happened in a while.
Well, for me it was very inspiring, and I thank you so much that you took your time today to talk with me, and I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you. Thank
you for the lovely questions. I mean, I stumbled quite a lot on those because
you gave great answers.
They were really interesting questions. Kind of makes me really think about what I do. And I suppose, so I'm just starting talking again, aren't I? Mm-hmm. But I think it's these sorts of conversations really challenge you to think about what you're doing with your life, isn't it?
Certainly.
And that's we often forget that. I think so. This has been very useful for me as well.
Well, I thank you so much, and I wish you and all of us the luck that things will be different again. And I really hope that one day we meet either in Great Britain or I can come to Berlin and hear your piece.
Yes.
And
that'd be great.
I thank you very much.
Lovely. Thanks very much.
This was the interview with James Saunders, and I really hope that it inspired you. I really like if you want to write me through email or through Facebook. I thank you very much that you tuned in with me today, and I really hope that you liked it and it inspired you. I would appreciate it so much if you could tell your friends and colleagues about this podcast. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best. Live your music, live your life, and see you next time. Yours, Irene.